Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything related to the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni, your host, joined by Cody, Bo, and Tracy. How are you guys doing?
Collective
Fantastic.
good, I think. Yeah, there we go. Fantastic.
How are you, Bo?
Yeah, I'm really great. Excited to be here.
I really shouldn't have done the collective one. Everybody's like, who goes first? Matt's in the background and Karen's here. Karen's back, and we're glad to have her. And we are going to talk about something fun today. But before we talk about this, I just want to say I love these podcasts because I can't believe that we have, as many as like 25 to 30,000 people to listen to these, but they're all insiders. They're all people that really love this. They love the nuances of working genius and how it applies to their lives, and they're sharing it with their friends and family and people at work. And so it's just so fun to talk to people who really want to go deep and have these conversations. And I am really thankful and grateful that you are with us. And so we're going to do another one of those things today where we're going to talk about nuance of working genius, which I think is kind of interesting. And what is that, Cody?
In case of emergency.
That's right. In case of emergency, what do you do? Break the glass. That's the thing. And we're going to talk about how when we get into emergency-like situations, stress situations, or when things kind of go awry, we often go to our toolboxes and pick up the tools that are most comfortable for us. And sometimes they're not actually the right tool. And that's what we want to talk about today, is how we default in difficult moments to the things we're most comfortable with. And sometimes that's appropriate, sometimes it's not. And it's a challenge that we should be aware of.
So I immediately resonate with the idea that my default is for me to pick up my geniuses. That shows up for me in almost every meeting that I'm in. It shows up at home. But in emergencies, when there is stress, it's like I'm aware that I actually have less capacity to be able to pick up my competencies or frustrations because there's just all this other stuff swirling. So I'm even more likely to pick up my geniuses, which every once in a while ends up working out great. But often what I end up doing is creating a bigger mess because I'm picking up and using something that isn't needed in the moment.
Exactly. I think just this week I was realizing that whenever there's a problem, when things get push comes to shove, I go, I think I need to invent my way out of this.
Yeah.
Because that's one of my geniuses. And inventing my way out. I look back on my life, my career, my family, being a dad and a husband. I think I that's the tool that jumps out of the box first and into my hand. And it's not always the right one. And sometimes it makes things worse.
I'll just say too, I mean, when we talk about this, when it applies to work, we often will say, hey, the first question you should ask is, where are we in work and what is required for the work that we're about to do? When you're in stress, you obviously don't take the time to do that. So you end up jumping right in at the elevation of your genius that fits you the best. So like most of us go right to the very thing that we feel most comfortable doing. And like you said, Bo, sometimes it does actually serve you well if it happens to coincide with what that, emergency is at that moment. But very often, and probably way more often, you're making a mess because of you're staying at an elevation without asking the first question of where are we? What's required?
It sounded like there was a story there, Pat. Is there something that happened recently or a story that comes to mind where you tried to invent yourself out of a situation?
No, I don't think there's one. I think that it just almost happened, yet again for the 99th time in the last year, probably, where something needed assistance or needed addressing. And I immediately said, I know, I'll invent a new idea. And it's like, I don't think the people that need my help need a new idea. I think what they need is whatever they need. And just because I'm good at something doesn't mean that's the right thing to do. And I should say that we did a podcast about regulating our geniuses a while back. This is different. This is like in that time of crisis, we tend to go to the thing we're most comfortable with. So it's not just about regulating. It's about knowing that we all have a tendency, whether we're W, I, D, G, E, or T as our geniuses, we all tend to default to the ones that we're most comfortable with. And we want to avoid that.
Now, I think I feel this really naturally with disruptive geniuses. And I'm curious about what that looks like in emergencies for a more responsive genius. So as a refresher, 3 of the geniuses are more disruptive. Invention, galvanizing, tenacity are more disruptive geniuses, and 3 of them are more responsive: wonder, discernment, and enablement. So I have 2 disruptive geniuses. And so in an emergency, what tends to happen, or in crisis, or when things aren't going well, is actually my disruptive geniuses get even louder, and I'm less nuanced. I'm actually a worse galvanizer, even though I've become a little bit of a louder galvanizer when things aren't going well. Tracy, I'm curious for you as a double responsive person, what this looks like for you when things aren't going well in emergency. How do the responsive geniuses come up in that context?
And which of your two responsive geniuses do you think you most quickly default to?
I absolutely know I default to my E. I think when I'm in the grip, when I'm in a stressful situation, it's so easy for me to double down on my E. And I think, Bo, your question, I think what happens is my E gets louder. It is responsive, but it definitely is heightened. So I think it's a similar response. I think it's not really a responsive disruptive thing. I think it's more everything just gets heightened in you. And I know that I default to my E, and it's not always needed.
That's what I was just going to bring up is you would think, oh, maybe enablement's kind of always a good thing to have in crisis. But Tracy, you would say, no, that's not always what's most needed around me.
Oh, yeah. And I do this with my kids all the time. That when there's a stressful time, I will just try to enable my way out of it. And oftentimes, they don't need my enablement. They might need some galvanizing. They might need a wonder question. But I just go straight to enablement all the time. And it could get frustrating for them.
Yeah, it's so interesting because none of us have T as a genius. You know, some of us have it as frustrations. Tracy, you have it as a competency. But I think there are people that like, when things get hard, work harder if you're a T.
Yes.
And when things get hard for me, come up with a new solution. You know, and there's a lot of W's. Actually, none of us have W as a genius either, but we know many that go, things get hard, ask more questions. You know, maybe. And the thing about it is that feels in the moment like this is the right thing to do. And boy, why is it parenting is the one that has really made this clear to me. Bo, you asked me before if there's a specific thing. There's not one specific thing, but it's really in parenting that I realize this. If my kids come to me with a problem, sometimes I just need to say, hey, just tell me about it. It's going to be okay. And or let me help you with what you need. Sometimes I need to E, but I'm not an E. So I'm always, what about this? Let's do this. Okay, here, I have a solution for you. And so sometimes, or I make a 2x2 matrix for them. Here's how you need to look at this. And that is just so common. And so I love the fact that we have people listening to this that are like, I'm a G. I immediately go, okay, come on, just move, get it done. Maybe that's not appropriate at that time.
Yeah.
What about you, Cody? What do you think you default to?
Well, actually, I've been a little quiet in my brain discerning if this story actually is an indication of me going to DG in stress or just is what got me my affectionate nickname on this podcast. But there's a story that I have from about a month ago where I'm traveling with my wife and my kids. We're a little late as a result of my doing. So I want to fix the problem. And we get to the Salt Lake City airport. And this has happened to me a couple times before. So I kind of knew I had already had some data points here, but I had just flown back from a different airport into Salt Lake City the night before. We walk through the metal detector, through the fast pass lane or whatever, where you don't have to take your shoes off.
And TSA.
TSA pre-check. And the metal detector goes off, and it always goes off in Salt Lake City. But I'm stressed, and so what I did was I went to the bad part of the discerner galvanizer where I had discerned that the sensitivity of this machine is too high based on the other traveling I'd been doing recently. And I went right to galvanizing this TSA person. And my wife is literally standing by the baggage claim. And I'm telling him, do you know that this is the most sensitive machine in all of the airports that I go through? I've been through other airports with these exact shoes on. I'm literally trying to like solve the very wrong problem here by discerning what the problem is and then giving this guy an earful about why they need to turn down the sensitivity of their machines there. When I should have been asking, what's the real problem here? And the problem is we're late and I just need to get my family to the gate in time. So...
Oh my gosh, this happened to me this morning. I'm on my way to work this morning. There's a car accident. 3 cars, it didn't look like it was going to be like super bad injuries, but I mean, bad car accident on the freeway. And I remember because I was like, why am I about to hit? And I had to swerve out of the way. And it just happened. Literally, there was a mom pulling her kids out of the car. She was in the second lane of the freeway. Horrible. I call 911 right away. It's freaking busy. Couldn't believe it. Then I call it back. I sit online for 3 minutes. She finally picks up. I tell her what's going on. She asks me a bunch of annoying questions, like, just send somebody over there. And at the end, I had to have a talk with her about why they need more people to answer the phones. And I know it's not her fault, but they really do need to. This is a real problem. And it's like, I think in that case, hang up, let them go do their stuff. I don't really need to give them advice about how to address the 911 thing. Although, for this podcast, I will just say it pisses me off that 911 is understaffed and we're spending money on so many stupid things. But anyway, that's my little vent. That's appropriate here, but not to the 911 lady. But again, when you're a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. So I thought I would just ID that problem.
Yep.
Well, and the interesting thing in a bunch of these scenarios is that you're not wrong, right? It's just about context and timing.
Yes.
In an emergency, time is precious. Attention is a precious resource. And so being able to pause and say, what's most needed right now, right, is worth the 10-second pause because Cody's running late to his gate, right? That lady's trying to get on another phone call. It's happened to all of us. Even if we're right, it might not be the thing that's needed right now.
Yeah, Karen just wrote me a note, and it's a really good one. And it's like, in an emergency, what we really want is control. And the way we get control is doing the things we're most comfortable doing. And which, again, once again, is not always the right way. But what about at work? How does this play out at work?
I was just going to say the same thing, Pat, is like, yeah, those are real life examples of stressful times. But I was just going into a very short meeting yesterday, and I had the same experience in terms of, because my mindset was, I have 30 minutes to solve this problem. I went right into the meeting thinking, just tell me what the problem is. I'll discern and tell you what to do. I will discern and galvanize the problem. And it was almost shocking. The person on the other side of the Zoom call came in and said, hey, I know we have a very specific thing to do right now, but started with a wonder question. And it was so jolting. It was the right question. And it was exactly what the meeting needed. But I was so prepared to just go in like a hammer, then everything was a nail, that it was almost shocking to see this question that was presented at the beginning actually changed the meeting in a really significant way. And had I just gone in the level of stress going like, this person needs an answer from me, I only have 30 minutes to deliver it, let me just go to my main genius to do this, my discernment and galvanizing, I would have given them the wrong answer.
That's really interesting because when you have a very short period of time to have a conversation, like you have limits, it becomes an emergency, doesn't it? Because otherwise you're like, hey, listen, I got an I and I got a D here. I'm going to use them both. So we don't have a lot of time, don't have a lot, but it's like, and okay, let's just say I only have 10 minutes. The first thing I have to do is say, maybe I'm not the one that needs to be driving this. Maybe I need to let this other person drive this. Maybe they have the right solution and I can leave my I and the D in the toolbox. But if every meeting is an emergency, we're going to find ourselves constantly picking up the tools that we're most comfortable with. Anyway, it's a challenge both ways.
You brought up work. I was almost immediately going to bring up that we're getting closer to the summer season where there's lots of times when we're around family. Mother's Day, Father's Day, Memorial Day, graduations, 4th of July, family vacations. And to have the awareness of the geniuses of your family, of course, would be an incredible gift. And for them to have a little more awareness about who you are, because every family vacation, every holiday, there's going to be something that is not going to go well. To have the context of, oh, that's just happening because Bo's default is galvanizing. Or, oh, we can pause right now and have some common language about, for Cody, that maybe what's needed right now isn't more discernment. Or for Tracy, what's needed right now isn't enablement. And I just think it's worth saying, probably most people who are on this podcast have taken their assessment. And there's probably a family member or two that would be so helpful if they knew their type and their geniuses going into a season where you're likely to have things that are stressful and are not going to go very well.
Yeah. We're going to develop an assessment for teenagers that we're going to be putting out this summer. In fact, we're going to be working on that today to reword the assessment and to write it in a way contextually that a teenager can relate to, because so many people have said, I really want to understand what my 15 or 16-year-old, what they're best at, so I can coach them through school or in life and other things. So that is a wonderful thing to do. Karen just asked me the question, so what's the most practical advice you'd give somebody around this? And here's what I would say. Whether you're talking about at work and your colleagues, or whether you're talking about at home, let the people around you know, hey, when the stuff hits the fan, I know that I'm going to default to these two things probably. And I know that I've done that in the past. You certainly know that. You know how when you come to dad in an emergency, he invents his way out of it, or mom enables her way out of it, or dad tries to tenacity his way and work, whatever else it is. I want you to know that I'm aware of that. And when that happens, you can say, time out, dad, mom, coworker, boss. I think you're going to the tool with the most comfortable handle. I'm not sure that's the right one. Let them be the one to call you, because it's wrong just to say to somebody, hey, don't do that. Because in an emergency, we tend not to, ready, fire, aim. We tend to fire, aim.
Yeah.
And so when we're getting ready to fire, for somebody else to take the gun and say, wait a second, maybe you're just comfortable doing that. That's the best thing we can do. Tell the people around us, you know me, I'm probably going to try to invent my way, or discern my way, or wonder my way, or galvanize my way, whatever it is, out of this emergency. And I'm giving you permission. In fact, I'm begging you to help me not do that. I think that's the main thing.
I think that's great advice, Pat. And I think that so much of this, like so many things in life, is just awareness first. Is like, hey, even as I described that story, I wasn't thinking of that story before the podcast, but as I'm retelling, I'm like, oh, if I just am aware that in stressful situations, I'm going to go right to the most comfortable handles, the geniuses that I possess, then that awareness, and then realizing like, oh, I'm stressed, is discernment and galvanizing called for in this moment. And I do this regularly, both at work and at home. When somebody's in pain or somebody needs something solved, I just think, well, here, let me use the thing I'm best at to do that. And my wife will say, on many occasions, like, I wish I had some enablement like Tracy. Like, I really just need someone to come alongside me at this point. I don't need someone helping me discern the right answer. So there's the awareness as the first step, and then exactly what you described, I think, is a super practical way to approach it.
Cody, you just said something I think is really important, because emergencies, what does that mean? I think it's often when someone is in pain, like when you like somebody's hurting and you're like, I want to help. And instead of diagnosing what they really need, sometimes we just go, well, I have a box of Band-Aids, so I'm going to put Band-Aids on. And it's like, well, they broke their leg. It's like, yeah, but I'm the Band-Aid guy. And so we need to actually slow down. And when we're in the grip, we need to slow down and say what is really required. Hey, I want to share something with people. I was on the road for 7.5 hours yesterday. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I turned a lot of them up to 1.5, a couple of them to 2. So I'm talking really fast today, because everything I listened to was like really fast. And I kind of liked that. So I'm really curious. You don't have to let us know, but which speed people listen to our podcast on, and whether we talk too slow or too fast, or how crazy it sounds. So I was just curious about that, because I was really speeding them up yesterday. What's your guess, guys? What do you think? How do you think people listen to us at 1, 1.25, or 1.5, or 2?
I've been on many Zoom calls where I'm meeting someone for the first time who has listened to the podcast, and they will often say, I listened to you at 1.5 speed. So I try to talk faster on those meetings to make sure that it matches their native environment that they've been listening to our voice in. So
what's your guess, Tracy?
Mine's 1.5. We've actually gotten that feedback quite a bit.
Okay.
Surprisingly. Yeah.
Cool.
I think that our listeners never want these to end, so they listen to them at half speed.
Why do they even have that? It's like, it doesn't, it's kind of spooky to listen to anything like that at half speed. So, okay, whatever you listen to, we want to go fast, and we want to finish on time. And you know what that means? When we're done talking, we have nothing left to say. So thank you for listening to us. Bo, I think you have a few words of wisdom you want to impart to people.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we are hosting a free live virtual event on May 17. It's Pat at the whiteboard talking about jobs, careers, and hiring. So you can go to workinggenius.com, and there'll be a little pop-up right there that you can sign up. invite a friend. And it may very well be the only time you can get this content is live at that event. So you do not want to miss it. Workinggenius.com. Sign up, bring your team, bring your friends. It's going to be so fun to see Pat in your native environment at the whiteboard.
Yeah, and we're really working on the content, the messaging of that, because there's so many people out there, whether they're just getting out of school or retiring or changing jobs in the middle of their career or coming to work out of being at home with their kids. And there's so many people that are like, what should I do? And we can't wait to give them good advice, both using Working Genius and some other things about how to go about that process. So I am excited about that. All right. Thank you, Bo. And thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Working Genius podcast. God bless.